before your best inner phase begins, everything familiar starts to break. You feel it, don't you? The confusion, the disconnection, the sense that the life you've been living no longer fits. Most people think something is wrong when this happens, but Jung would tell you, it's a signal, a sacred disturbance. Before the self can rise, the ego must fall apart. And that collapse, it starts in the mind. This isn't a motivational video. It's not about thinking positive or attracting your dream life. This is about what really happens when you're close to psychological evolution, and why it often feels like you're falling backwards before you step forward. In this video, I'll show you 9 mental shifts that almost always appear right before the soul begins to awaken. They're not comfortable, but they are necessary. And if you're experiencing any of them, you may be closer to transformation than you think. These changes aren't loud. They don't arrive with clarity or confidence. They creep in as restlessness, as an unfamiliar silence, as an urge to withdraw from things that once felt safe. And in that discomfort, something ancient inside you begins to move. Jung believed, the unconscious doesn't ask politely. It shakes, it strips, it silences. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. These mental shifts are not signs of weakness. They're invitations to go deeper than you ever have before. To question not just your choices, but your entire identity. So, if you're tired, uncertain, or feel like something invisible is pressing against your old life, good, stay here. Watch until the end. Because what you'll hear next isn't just information, it's initiation. Every deep transformation begins in fog, not light, not certainty. Confusion is not a mistake in the process, it is the process. Carl Jung believed that when the old structures of the ego begin to break, the psyche enters a state of psychological chaos. Not because you're failing, but because you're evolving. You stop recognizing yourself. What once made sense no longer moves you. What once gave you meaning now feels empty. This mental disorientation isn't random. It's a sacred unraveling. The self, your true essence, cannot emerge until the false self begins to dissolve. That confusion you feel, it's not your weakness. It's your psyche rearranging itself into something more honest. But it hurts. It always does. In this phase, many people panic. They try to hold on tighter to who they used to be. They force old routines. They seek clarity through control. But the superior mind, the one seeking wholeness, begins to realize this is a necessary death. Not literal, but symbolic. The death of certainty. The death of roles. Jung called this the symbolic death of the ego. And it's terrifying, because it leaves you naked in front of your own truth. You may ask, who am I now? And the answer won't come quickly. Because first, you must stand still in the fog. That stillness allows something new to take shape. Something from within, not from the world. That is where real clarity is born. Let's get personal. Have you ever felt like you were outgrowing your own mind? Like you couldn't fit back into your old thoughts, your old beliefs, but you weren't sure what to replace them with? That in-between space is sacred. It's what Jung might call a liminal state, where you are no longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. In that space, the mind searches for a new center, but you can't rush it. You have to let the psyche speak in its own time, often through dreams, silence, symbols, and strange longings. Clarity doesn't arrive with force. It arrives like morning light, slowly, quietly, and only after the long night has humbled you. Practically, this phase might look like emotional exhaustion, indecision, questioning everything, your work, your relationships, even your faith. You might feel numb one day and deeply sensitive the next. That's not instability. That's inner reorganization. The confusion isn't a sign to stop. It's a sign to listen deeper, to retreat from the noise and observe what is dying inside you. Not everything that falls apart is a loss. Some things are being stripped away because they were never yours. To begin with, the superior man, the superior mind, begins to discern this. He doesn't panic when clarity disappears. He knows. It's often a sign that something greater is forming. And when that new clarity begins to whisper, not shout, you'll recognize it. It won't look like excitement. It will feel like alignment. Subtle, solid, quietly powerful. But you'll never get there unless you allow yourself to pass through the sacred confusion. Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And confusion is often the first pain that calls you. So if you're in it, don't escape. Don't label it failure. It may be the first true sign that your inner transformation has already begun. But what happens next is even more revealing. Because once the world outside begins to fade, and the old you no longer fits, the mind starts to crave silence. Solitude, retreat, not to escape the world, but to meet the self at some point in the process of inner transformation. The world begins to feel ... distant. Not because something's wrong with the world, but because something is shifting within you. The noise becomes unbearable. The social masks start to itch. You begin craving solitude, not as isolation, but as sanctuary. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He believed that the self often initiates transformation by pulling your energy inward. This is not depression. This is incubation, a psychological retreat. You may feel the need to disconnect from people, from routines, from roles, not to escape, but to listen. Because the voice of the self is quiet. It does not shout, and you can only hear it in stillness. This withdrawal is misunderstood in modern culture. We're told to be productive, social, available. But true growth doesn't happen in exposure, it happens in sacred privacy. Think of the caterpillar. It must enter the cocoon to dissolve. The man who resists this stage, who keeps forcing his extroverted habits, who refuses to be alone, delays his own rebirth. Jung would say, the psyche knows when it's time to turn inward. And when you ignore that call, you suffer. Not because you're broken, but because you're denying nature. The self needs space. And sometimes that space looks like silence, boredom, even discomfort. But within that space, something is forming. This phase is often marked by strange behaviors. You cancel plans for no clear reason. You feel overstimulated by environments that used to energize you. You may want to read, write, wander in silence, or just be alone with your thoughts. Your relationships may shift. Not because you hate anyone, but because your soul is refining its resonance. You no longer have the energy to perform. You become more honest, sometimes painfully so. This is not regression. It's a return to your center. A man who honors this retreat is not weak. He is preparing. Because what's being reborn in him is not another identity. It's his essence. Jung warned that the ego fears this stage. It says, you're wasting time. You're losing momentum. You're becoming antisocial. But the deeper voice inside says, stay here, breathe, watch. This is the womb of the new self. And like any birth, it cannot be rushed. The mind begins to reorient. Your dreams may become more vivid. Your priorities shift. Your intuition sharpens. You stop asking what the world wants from you and start asking what your soul wants for you. This is not detachment from life. It's reattachment to your life, one that is internally directed, not externally dictated. And eventually, without trying, something shifts. The desire to re-engage with the world returns. But this time, you're not seeking distraction. You're seeking alignment. You're not escaping solitude. You're bringing it with you. That's the difference. The man who has gone inward and returned no longer lives from the surface. He speaks slower, moves with intention, and no longer needs noise to feel alive. But before this quiet power emerges, another layer must be faced. The emotional debris buried in your shadow. And that part of the journey is never easy. But it is essential. The real turning point in any deep inner process is when you stop running from what hurts. Carl Jung warned that no man becomes whole until he meets the part of himself he has always denied. That part has a name, the shadow. It holds your repressed emotions, your guilt, your envy, your wounds, not just from your life, but often from the generations before you. And it doesn't go away when you ignore it. It grows. It speaks through your triggers. It moves through your relationships. It whispers in your most irrational reactions. The superior man, the man who seeks true transformation, eventually understands. What you refuse to face will quietly govern your life. At first, confronting the shadow feels like betrayal. It shakes your self-image. You begin to see things you never admitted to yourself. The rage beneath your kindness. The resentment under your politeness. The self-hate behind your perfectionism. But this discomfort is sacred. Jung didn't say to destroy the shadow. He said to integrate it. To bring it to consciousness so it can no longer sabotage you from within. You may feel flooded with emotion. Old memories rise like ghosts. You might cry for no reason, or feel waves of shame that don't match your present moment. This is not regression. This is revelation. Your psyche is surfacing what needs healing. Not to punish you, to free you. Practically, shadow confrontation means slowing down and observing your reactions. Why did that comment upset you so much? Why do you keep choosing the same kind of relationship? Why do you feel exhausted after being around certain people? The answers live beneath the surface. Journaling helps. So does therapy. So does honest solitude. You begin to name what you used to avoid. You stop blaming others and start decoding your own patterns. It's not easy. You may feel raw, exposed, unstable, but that's the sign that the mask is cracking and truth is entering. Not the truth you show the world, the truth that only you and your soul have the courage to hold. As you stay in this phase, something miraculous begins to shift. You realize your shadow is not your enemy, it's your teacher. It holds your power. The anger you repressed, it was your boundary. The sadness you buried, it was your compassion. The fear you ignored, it was your longing for trust. Everything you pushed away comes back with wisdom. And when you listen, when you welcome it without collapsing, the inner war begins to end. You're no longer divided. You stop living in fragments. That's integration. And that's where strength is reborn. Not in denial, but in acceptance. But this isn't the final destination. After the shadow is met and your illusions begin to fall, something else begins to stir, a deeper shift. Your entire worldview starts to collapse. Goals lose meaning. Roles dissolve. You begin to question everything. Who am I, truly? What matters now? And those questions don't bring immediate answers, but they do open the door to something real and irreversible. There comes a moment, after the confusion, after the silence, after the shadow, when your old story simply stops making sense. The things you used to chase no longer excite you. The goals you once sacrificed for start to feel hollow. Even your language begins to shift. This is what Jung meant when he said the ego must surrender to the self. It's not a breakdown of reality. It's a breakdown of your interpretation of reality. You're no longer satisfied with survival strategies, borrowed beliefs, or inherited expectations. Something inside of you is done pretending. And what's left is a blank page. Terrifying, liberating, necessary. This is often the most destabilizing part of inner transformation. You question everything. Your purpose, your identity, your values, your direction. Friends may not understand you anymore. You might feel alien in your own skin. And yet, a deeper part of you knows this collapse is sacred. It's the psyche making room for a more authentic foundation. Jung said the ego must go through sacrifice and suffering to make space for the self. It's a kind of psychological death. Not one that destroys you, one that sets you free. The problem is, no one talks about this phase. It's quiet, private, but every person on the path of wholeness must walk through it. You might feel detached from goals you used to obsess over. You might start questioning your career, your religion, your relationships, not out of rebellion, but out of awakening. You see how much of your life was built on shoulds, roles, and unconscious conditioning. You start to wonder, what would my life look like if it were truly mine? That's not a selfish question, it's a sacred one. Because for the first time, you're not asking how to fit into the world. You're asking how to live from your soul. And to do that, the old maps must burn. Not because they were evil, but because they no longer take you where you're going. This phase is not about destruction for its own sake. It's about pruning, cutting away what is no longer alive in you. The image of success you once admired, gone. The version of masculinity you were taught to perform, gone. Even your spiritual language may shift, becoming quieter, deeper, more intimate. You stop quoting and start listening. The superior man doesn't panic when the old self dies. He watches. He grieves. He honors the version of himself that got him here and lets it go. Because he understands clarity isn't just about knowing where you're going. It's about knowing what you must leave behind. And when you've let go of enough, not everything, but enough, something begins to rise. It's not a plan. It's not even a clear identity. It's a signal. A subtle new current inside you. A whisper from the self that says, now, build something real. This is the beginning of your better inner phase. Not because everything is fixed, but because everything is finally true. But this final shift can't be manufactured. It emerges quietly. After all the noise dies down. And that's what we explore next. After the collapse, there's quiet. Not silence out of fear, silence out of reverence. You've survived the confusion. You've honored your solitude. You've faced the shadow. You've watched the old narrative burn. And now, from within the ashes, something begins to stir. It's not loud. It doesn't come with fanfare. It's subtle, gentle, like a whisper in the dark. Jung called it the emergence of the self, the deeper center of your psyche. It doesn't speak in commands. It speaks in resonance. A certain phrase gives you chills. A path you once ignored suddenly glows. You don't think your way into it. You feel your way into it. And when it speaks, At this point, you don't need certainty, you need alignment. You start making choices that nourish your peace, not your ego. You move slower, but with more conviction. You stop asking, what should I be doing? And start asking, what am I being invited to become? This is where your better phase truly begins, not the phase the world celebrates, the one your soul recognizes. You stop performing, you start inhabiting. You're no longer just trying to heal, you're learning to live. And your life starts to feel like it belongs to you again. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. This shift comes with signs, subtle but unmistakable. You begin to feel peace without needing a reason. You stop comparing yourself to others because their journey no longer defines your value. You wake up with questions that feel alive, not oppressive. You start creating, sharing, expressing not to impress, but because it overflows from within. You may even feel a renewed desire to serve, to guide, to contribute. This isn't about becoming better, it's about becoming whole. The superior man doesn't seek success to prove his worth. He moves with quiet authority because he knows who he is and who he is becoming. But don't expect perfection. The self doesn't erase your past, it reframes it. Your wounds remain, but they soften. Your shadow still whispers, but now you recognize the voice. Your fear doesn't vanish, but it no longer drives the car. You've entered a new inner phase, one defined not by the absence of pain, but by your relationship with it. Jung would say you've moved from being a collection of roles to being a living story. And that story is yours to tell. Not to please, not to persuade, but to embody. That's the mark of a man who has met his self. He doesn't chase meaning, he becomes it. And now, looking back, you understand. The confusion had purpose. The silence was sacred. The shadow was your guide. The collapse was your doorway. And this phase, this quiet, grounded, unshakable phase, is not your reward. It's your truth. It's not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a new one. One that comes from within, one that no longer needs permission, and one that, this time, will not be built on illusion, but on inner clarity. So, which of these shifts are happening inside you, right now? Not on the surface, but underneath the noise. Have you noticed? The silence growing louder, the need to pull away from things that once defined you, the internal friction between who you've been and who you can no longer pretend to be. That tension is not failure, it's transition. And if you're feeling lost, tired, or uncertain, good. It means your old life is no longer sustainable, and something deeper is asking to be born. Don't run from it. Sit with it. Let it teach you. Because when the mind begins to break, it's not falling apart. It's breaking open. And if this message touched something in you, don't let it fade into background noise. Reflect on it. Journal about it. Live it. Subscribe to Shadow and Light. Activate the bell. This isn't just a channel, it's a path, and we walk it together. In truth, in silence, and in depth.